Welcome to another episode of the IRONMAN Insider podcast presented by Maurten. I'm Matt Lieto, and today we've got an extra special guest in an extra special place. We're actually here in Kailua, Kona, just a little bit before the VinFast Ironman World Championships, and I'm here with Dr. David Spindler. What's going on, man?
Not much.
Just chilling?
Yeah, I'm here on the island. Apparently there's something on in a couple of days. So,
Yeah, he hasn't figured out what he's in for yet.
Yeah, it's my first time to the island.
Yeah. So I met David in Nice. He was working with an athlete, Chelsea Sodaro, and proud to say that we hit it off, best of buddies. And so I'm not gonna maybe be as unbiased as I normally am in the hard-hitting questions with my guests because
You can be as biased as you like.
you like it, biased. I love it. But so Dr. David Spindler is a world-renowned neuroscientist. And you might be asking right now why Matt Lieto would put himself next to someone smart enough to be referred to as a world-renowned neuroscientist. And I don't know why either. It's going to be pretty obvious here that I'm outgunned in the intellectual side of things. I told you I'd be self-deprecating.
Yeah, don't do that.
But Dr. David Spindler works with a lot of athletes. And tell us what you do for those athletes on a broad paintbrush.
Probably the easiest way to describe it is I support the athlete from a holistic perspective.
Okay.
I work with how your brain functions and then how that relates to performance from the central nervous system. It's all one body. Brain body is one system. It's not brain and body. It's not psychology and physiology. It's actually all one.
Yeah.
It's all interlinked.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so some of his athletes that he works with, you might have seen him on, I think it was a Netflix documentary with Mark Cavendish. He didn't want to be on it, but he did because he loves Mark so much, right?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, now, yes. At the start, not so much. But so I've worked with Cav, or Sir Mark Cavendish, as it is these days, since the end of 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. And works with some other world-class World Tour cyclists, some Formula One drivers, and I could go down a list, and it's like basically the top however many athletes in all of their disciplines. And people in sport generally, like I think it's easier to like draw the line to, okay, that makes sense with F1, right? Because people think about like reaction time and stuff like that, right? But I know for me, I was initially kind of surprised by seeing you. I actually saw you first on a interview with a World Cup mountain biker.
Really?
Yeah.
Sammy Gaze?
Yeah, Sammy Gaze.
Ah, right.
Yeah, and I didn't know that until after we met, that I like kind of remembered. But Sam Gaze had been pretty open about going through, bouts of depression and having challenges mentally. But it was very clear that what you did wasn't just support that; it was support his body through his mind to get the most out of the athlete. Is that right to an extent?
Yeah. So that's probably put it more articulately than I could have.
Okay.
So apparently the self-deprecating is not needed. But yeah, so how your brain functions also relates to how the muscles fire and how you can extend how hard and how long you can go is really related to, quite a fair few of neurotransmitters in the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is it? And I should say he's also works with a few professional triathletes. Talked about Chelsea Sodaro, and here on the island with Sam Laidlow. Mm-hmm. And clearly, it's funny. The athletes that you work with are athletes that I often hear people talking about. Like, man, how does this person transcend? Right? Like, it's always a person that's transcendent in some way against their peers, and it seems to be athletes that are trying to. They tick all the boxes, but then they've like found a new box to tick, right? Like the athletes that you work with are athletes that have ticked every box, and then in my mind, it seems like maybe they've found a new box to tick, right? Or a box that like at least the layman doesn't know the best athletes in the world are trying to tick. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the best in the world at what they do, well, there's a few of us, colleagues, me included, in the world that do what we do, and the best in the world have somebody to help them improve performance when it comes from a neurological perspective and a whole brain-body experience perspective, rather than just a sports psychology or a mindset coach. So,
right.
Yeah.
And am I right in that one of your colleagues, the most recognizable, is probably Huberman?
Yeah. So Andrew definitely is at the forefront of education of our field.
Yeah.
He does a really good job at that, far better than what I could. And
or is that self-deprecation again?
No, but it's actually true as well.
Yeah.
Not only self-deprecation, but there's some factual information in there as
Yeah.
well. I don't have the ability to be able to put myself out there, where he definitely has. He has that personality, but yeah. So when it comes to a sports performance portion, there's a reason why the best of the best.
Yeah, and it seems like what he's done really well. Obviously, he's great at his podcasts and being able to speak about what you guys do. But I think he originally presented it, and still probably does, presented it in a way that a layman wasn't walking into neuroscience.
No,
they were just walking into like advice on health.
Yeah. So if he did present it in the way that you teach people at a university setting, then that information doesn't get inputted the way that it needs to, and the boom of our field would never have even been there. But yeah, so he's really good at what he does.
Yeah, and I think what's anytime you see a new specialty or something that in 10 years we're not going to call it a specialty, it'll just be another thing that we use. There's somebody has opened that door and allowed that to catch on, and that seemed like for the mainstream that was Huberman.
Yeah.
But it seems like from experience, the more now that I know you, a lot of athletes that I respect and see doing special things are working with you, and when I have the ability to actually chat with those athletes, you're an indispensable piece of their kind of coaching and
it's a really nice thing to say.
Advisor. I didn't.
No, it just is. Yeah.
And so, what is it? I know it's in a few minutes. It's hard to explain exactly what you do, but I think a lot of people will look at. Okay, so Dr. David Spindler, neuroscientist, mindset coach.
No.
So it's not, you're not telling Sam before the race, so I want you to, when it feels hot, I want you to think cold. Or if you feel sad, I want you to think happy, or a mantra that he writes on his top tube. Like, what is the difference between someone that's like mantra focused or, mindset driven? And we all need motivation, and that's beneficial. But what's the difference between, because you're definitely not a motivational coach. You're a
So
neuroscientist.
For me, you can't define what motivation is, so therefore it's not needed.
Okay. Yeah.
Same with confidence. So there's all of these mindset or sports psychology phrases and terms that are there, that what they really are is eliciting a response within the brain itself, and they light up several thoughts, behaviours and actions light up areas of the brain that then elicit some response to whatever that is. And so mantras do work, but they work because of neuroscience. They don't work because of the placebo that most people think that they do.
Right. So is it, so I think we're getting into like pathways, right? So tell us about like what a neural pathway is and how maybe someone that is on the right set of and setting their neural pathways up in a positive way for performance and a negative way in performance.
Well, the big one is it's called the HPA axis, hippocampus, pituitary, amygdala axis.
Yeah.
And what that is a reward pathway in the brain, then goes through all the frontal lobe and sort of disperses from there. And what that pathway actually does is give you actually a sense of motivation, what people perceive as motivation.
Right.
And it's the feeling you get, I don't know, just before you go and say hello to a beautiful lady.
Okay. Yeah. Good example.
For you,
yeah.
Possibly. Or the feeling you get when you seek reward from something and then you just before you get that reward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not the end goal.
No,
it's getting that reward, isn't it? It's
it's actually you getting to that goal and the journey towards that goal, and you knowing that you are just about to get there is the activation that you need to be able to produce performance.
Okay, and like, are we talking like release things like dopamine? Is that part of this?
One of them, yeah. It's actually one of the main neurotransmitters within the brain. Dopamine, it's all the really cool stuff you see on, which
for sure
annoys me quite a lot. Dopamine resets, which is actually not what you need to do. You actually need to talk
about that.
You need to reset your behavior. It's got nothing to do with dopamine.
Right.
It's the behavior that creates the dopamine in the first place. Dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine, which is noradrenaline, adrenaline, GABA. There's 20 different neurotransmitters that do very specific things at specific timings. So how you control those through thoughts, behaviors, and actions that are very, very specific to the athlete, which is why I do what I do and why I'm here on the island right now.
Right.
Because I can't do that in a video conference with Sam.
Yeah, you have to be able to see
how have to see where he is, and it's like, okay, let's use that portion or this portion or that portion.
Yeah.
Because it's what we're doing is eliciting a response. I have zero interest in the placebo effect of a belief system. I mean, I can believe I can win Kona.
Yeah, you're not gonna.
Absolutely no chance. Like, there's less.
I agree.
Yeah, there's zero chance of me doing that.
Yeah.
But that's why belief systems may work.
Yeah.
But they need to be objectively something that can happen.
But they only work because of
the fact that you have the capacity in the first place.
Yes, that and because they will affect the neural pathways
100%, yes.
on the way to...
Yeah. And if you don't know what those neural pathways are, what you're actually doing as a coach or whatever is like trying to bottle lightning.
Right.
Yeah. So if you can understand where that pathway is coming from and why they do what they do, and what the pathway is activated as a result of whatever behaviour, then you can either circumvent that behaviour or change the pathway of that behaviour to be able to get you where you need to be at a specific time frame.
Right. And it's super interesting to me that like it is, like we talk about the journey in sport, and that comes off of like positive experiences and things that we learn on the way, but the way to best treat your nervous system for success is actually like it is the journey towards what we're shooting for that will get you that response. Yeah.
So if you think of like and I've learnt recently that you were a triathlete back in the day.
Yeah.
If you think of when you cracked,
like
when you decided, I can't either sustain that performance to whatever, that's a neural pathway that's making that happen. Because if you stop for a little bit and walked, you can run again.
Right.
At marathon pace or above marathon pace.
Yeah.
So the capacity's there, isn't it? So what's actually causing you to stop? That thought process, which is adenosine acetylcholine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can actually change, or it's called mediation, which is to remove some portions of that.
Yeah.
Of those two neurotransmitters by dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, depending on what pathway you need.
Right. So if you're an athlete that, again, if it was me and I was going to crack and I was going to elicit that response from those two, how does someone like me go on the positive side and find dopamine?
Well, it doesn't have to be positive.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
That's the point.
Right.
Again, that's why you need to learn the behavior of the person in the first place.
Okay.
Because if you grew up in a really violent, say, area or family, you may need to elicit a totally different response of someone who's born as a highly religious or
Right.
whatever, you know.
Because all these responses are your nervous system trying to protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It's a control mechanism somewhere.
Right. And so, we talk, and I know we've talked a lot about, or recently I've discovered that a lot of what you're talking about has had a great effect on me, coming from a period of anxiety and having like a high neural stress.
Yep.
Right. And alleviating that stress. And I'm probably misspeaking on terms here, but has allowed me to have more performance because I'm living in a state of less about fight or flight, which people talk about, and more about, good stuff's going to happen. Like, let's see what happens today. Be open. People talk about being open to new things, and things will come to you.
Yep.
Tell us
Have
a bit.
they that?
They have.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, they do, for sure. This conversation being one of those things. And what is it about, like, chilling out that nervous system, people that are, we talked about social media, like always waiting for the next response and maybe thinking it might be negative, specifically on social media, and what the response is when we're able to chill that out and be in a state that I speak of, where I'm like more, let's see what happens.
So that vagal inhibition that we were talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, so the vagus nerve comes from sort of top of like a little bump in the back of your skull.
Okay.
Sort of around there somewhere, just like in maybe an inch.
Yeah.
That's one of your terms, isn't it? Inch.
Yeah.
It's like 3 centimeters.
Yeah.
And then it goes sort of down through the neck, and it's the main one that's your heart. It's your inbuilt pacemaker.
Okay.
It's what elicits the response of whether your heart either beats at 300 beats a minute, or 47 or whatever. And that's per minute, and obviously each beat's slightly different, which is that heart rate variability that people talk about now.
Right.
But also it's connected to the phrenic nerve, which is the nerve that elicits the response from your diaphragm and breathing.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why what we've talked about in the past is those breathing exercises that you do also controls that heart rate as a result of that.
Right.
Which then controls the rest of the central nervous system, which then elicits that response of the.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And it's probably I can make that in a far more medical way, but that's it's actually the way that it does.
It's that we're looking for.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So you can also do that if you're freaking out after 200 meters of the swim, or you get into T1 and you're 45 seconds behind the front pack, or you're getting dropped on a climb at the Tour de France, or you've just freaked yourself out massively in turn 1 at 350 kilometers an hour in Formula One. How do you then control your central nervous system to be able to go, okay, let's reset. Let's not do a factory reset, but just do a reset, and let's continue good to go from there.
Well, and I think, an example that most or a lot of people watching will understand is, and tell me if I'm wrong, but that 200 meters hyperventilating is like, imagine that breathing is a response to the nervous system.
But that's the fight or flight response that we were talking about, that you were talking about earlier. You know? Like, how do you control that? That's the thing that you need to. That's what's learned. It's a learned behavior.
Right.
One, it's a learned behavior of it happening in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's also a learned behavior of you controlling that response at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So imagine you are spending time. You're not going to be next to Sam on a motorcycle during the race.
Not during the race.
Yeah. No, but I know that you've been out with him during bike rides and training sessions. So are you teaching these athletes to be able to recognize when they're going down that state?
Yeah. So there's cues.
Yeah.
Like you have, like if you, my wife can tell me when I'm about to get heightened.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we've been around each other, even though I'm not home often enough.
Yeah.
We've been around each other often enough for her to be, because I have really high anxiety as well. Like it's a trait of mine.
Yeah.
And she can just say, just pump the brakes a bit.
Yeah.
Like, and then I'll go into my learned responses of that heightened state.
Right.
And control myself in a way that I don't make an absolute of myself. Yeah.
Which I can't imagine is too hard for you. And so can you tell us if that was me, and from what you know from me, and I was out racing and I felt like I hit a point where things were going that direction, what type of thing would I do? Would I would I work on some breathing during the race, or what?
Yeah, very
what would
much
it be?
dependent on what sport you're doing at the time
Okay.
too.
Yeah, sure.
So if we're talking about the swim,
Sure.
such, your breathing response is very deliberate anyway.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is then control how you breathe
Right.
and when you breathe within that stroke.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about swimming,
Sure.
enough about swimming to be able to give you the exact thing of that. I have another professional swimmer at the
Okay.
moment.
Oh, cool.
That's something that we're working through.
Yeah.
She's open water swimmer.
Yeah.
And I'm having to learn the mechanics of the sport to be able to then deliver to her the response that she needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Because swimming is really like, it's an underwater sport.
Right.
It's done on top,
Yeah.
but you are not breathing for the majority of the time.
It's the only sport, one of the only sports you do where holding your breath is part of the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is totally different than if you did it on a bike ride
Sure.
and you're starting to get dropped, or you've scared the bejesus out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like coming down Harvey because
Sure.
the crosswind has hit you and you've almost gone into the rock face.
Yeah.
How do you then just go, okay, what breathing pattern? One, what's my heart rate at the moment?
Okay.
Because if you're already above capacity,
Right.
And your breathing pattern is then as a response to the amount of output that you're putting in the first place,
Yeah.
that's a lot harder than if you're under threshold in the first place, and you can actually control your breath.
Right.
Because the breath is controlling the effort at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So above threshold and below threshold, however you want to name that, whether
Sure.
you're Scandinavian or American or whatever protocol you do. Like,
Yeah. The Norwegians probably have a different name for it for sure.
yeah, what they call it LT2 or something, don't they?
Do they? Yeah. They might.
It's the correct one.
It's all very secret.
It's
The
very,
Norwegians.
very. It's actually the scientific name for it, which is very Norwegian.
That is. And so to me, it's interesting. I've listened to some of the other chats that you've had, and we've had a bunch of chats. And again, from my experience in the last year, trying to figure out why, through past traumas and stuff, physically and, in other ways, why I was at this fight or flight state. And part of what I think, we see a lot more anxiety. I mean, it's well known that there's more anxiety now, especially in youth, than there has been in a long time. And for youth and for me, a lot of that, and it seems like something you control a lot for your athletes, is social media, because we're getting, seems like a negative response, or we're opening ourselves up to that negativity on social media. Tell us a bit about why social media has to be something that you're working on with these athletes.
Yeah, for sure. But one, social media is extremely needed
Okay.
when it comes to professional sport.
Yes. Yeah.
So
the landscape that we're in, you have to be on.
it has to be there.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, you have to manage what that social media and what that response is to those things.
Right.
Yeah? And you doing your job, which is what we've spoken to in the past.
Yeah.
It's not always positive feedback.
No.
And the negative feedback is the one that you kind of pinpoint that gets into your brain, and it's usually someone, Orange Peter.
Yeah, totally.
7648.
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
That gets in your head rather than anyone else. But again, human brain's not overly concerned with how much positive feedback you get.
Yeah.
It really targets the negative one.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way the brain works for whatever reasons. And
it's a negative bias, right? Is what they call it?
Yeah. And
then,
then
it is, to me, it is crazy because, like, however many followers, let's say I've got like 200 followers on Instagram, maybe a little bit more, but not that much more. If I had 200 and on a post I got 199, you're the best thing ever, and one negative one, that negative one would stand out and it would affect my day.
100%. Yeah. One, you've got incredible engagement with your followers.
Yeah, totally.
Because every single
100%.
yeah.
For sure.
But two, controlling social media, especially in and around race week,
Yeah.
is unbelievably important.
Yeah.
Sam, at the moment, has removed all social media from his personal phone.
Okay.
He's allowed to have it for a specific, not allowed. That's the wrong word. His own man.
Yeah, totally.
But Chelsea was her own as well. But he puts it up either on his laptop
Right.
or on his phone, but then deletes it straight away for no more than 30 minutes per day.
And what is that effect of taking that negative response? And is it the negative response, or is it, as we were talking about, pathway to, I wonder if there's going to be a negative response?
Oh, it is what's everyone else doing?
Right.
What are they, like if I put up I don't know what they call, reel?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
They do that still.
But video or post or whatever, TikTok, whatever it is, showing my age, you then scroll and it's colour and movement, right?
Right.
So what does a baby want? They want, when you, a child, and all they want to see is the TV screen with colour and movement.
Okay.
And lots of sounds and stuff.
Sure.
100% social media.
Yeah.
Your brain's just like focusing in on that colour and movement, and that's the reward. It's just over and over and over again.
And what is it about that? Like, I know, like when I'm, fatigued.
It's stimulating. It's highly stimulating.
But like, I'll sit there for an hour and be like, oh my gosh, I was just been on here for an hour.
Yeah.
And that's, your brain is just, that's.
Yeah, it is literally so stimulated in general. So the frontal lobe is just going, what's happening? What's this? What's that? What's going on? And it releases all of the really cool TikTok chemicals.
Yeah.
Dopamine, serotonin,
right,
epinephrine, norepinephrine, to be able to then just go, I'm in a heightened state.
And so why is that a negative thing?
It's only negative when you stop.
Yeah.
Or you've got too much of it. Yeah.
Because you have like a crash.
Yeah. Like if you did that and then went and had a massive, I don't know, did a 5K fast.
Yeah.
It actually is a performance enhancement.
So you're saying I should look at Instagram?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. but that is, like, it would give you all of the stimulation that you'd get from something that's really highly rewarding. Yeah. Right. Which would be a 5K PR, 10K PR, whatever. Like,
but there's always a down from
it. Always. Right. Yeah. But if you use that stimulation that you're getting from the pathway activation, which then creates the neurotransmitters as a result of it, then that's exactly what it does. And that's not what we want race week.
Right, because you don't want any down. We're just reserving.
It's a calmer's fast.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so if your central nervous system is calm, it actually fires muscles more efficiently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
If
you've got a really tense muscle, say, because that's what a heightened central nervous system does. Sure. Just like if you, we're just saying this as a more than what it actually does. Yeah. Like it's tensing all of your muscles pretty much because it's ready for action in some way. Right. And then you try and move. Yeah. Try and do that if you're already tensed. Yeah. It's very, very difficult to do. Work. If you're nice and calm and you're controlled in your responses to your natural environment or the environment that your vision can see, and all of your other sort of senses, then that muscle firing and the activation of those muscles becomes far more efficient.
Right. That makes sense. And it all makes sense. But that reserving that stimulus race week or just being in that lowered state allows those athletes, when it's time to perform, they get to call upon all that.
Yeah, we don't want a lowered state. We want a neutral state.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So, yeah, and then from that, if you happiness could be,
Yeah.
that then releases all the other things,
Right.
dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all the good ones that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
which then allows you to extend that time of exhaustion a little bit further.
Right. And I've heard you say, talk about, and other people talk about in the past, something called happiness watts.
Yeah, it's my PhD.
Yeah. PhD in happiness watts.
Pretty much. Yeah, so I did it in decision making above threshold in professional cyclists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you found that if they're actually just not talking science or anything, if they're happy, they're going to be able to perform at a higher.
Yeah, so if they're in a happy, content, but still driven state,
Yeah.
then you produce performances more consistently, or you have the percentage chance of being more consistently performing than anywhere else.
Right. And for me, it's interesting because it's, you're like, we had a conversation yesterday. You said, I think it was 12 years of advanced studies to get
Yeah,
where
a
you're
little
at?
bit more, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this statement sounds like something that a motivational speaker would say, but I've heard you say happiness increases the time to exhaustion.
Yeah.
And you're saying that as a medical professional.
Not medical, I'm a professional.
Yeah, professional.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it does. There's proven studies to show that.
And is there, it's funny because I see it and I know it. We've talked about examples of buddies that have been to the Olympics, but were seen from the outside as not taking things seriously because they had fun doing other things.
Yeah.
And at the end of people's career, they say, oh, if only he would have focused more on this, he would have had more success. You're like, no, he would have burnt out and not actually been part of the conversation.
He wouldn't have been in the Olympics. You could argue
Yeah.
that person specifically wouldn't have got to the Olympics in the first place.
Right. So when you, and we joke around.
There's not one box
Yeah.
that suits all when it comes to this.
And there are some probably that like what we would consider happiness, they don't exhibit, but they're quite successful.
But what they classify as happiness is not what we classify as happiness either.
Success is happiness for them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And so I love that. And remember that because to me, I think that's where the lines cross, right? Like if you are someone that has mantras or has, a mindset that is around positivity, there's a point where the scientific side that you represent and this side intersect and like it kind of doesn't matter how you get there.
No.
Right?
No. So placebos also work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you
just can't like totally depend on it.
But there's lots of like if you fill a tequila bottle full of water, and then tell the person that it's actually tequila, that person will exhibit drunken-like behaviours as a result of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A placebo effect is real. It's there. Like you can give sugar tablets for pain, and if the person believes that that is a pain thing, then that placebo effect and nocebo effect actually is something that it's a real phenomena within neuroscience that makes that happen.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so with the triathletes that you've worked with, and cyclists are very similar, and I'm obviously inspired by what you've done with Sir Mark Cavendish, fan of his for a long time, was able to meet him, and he's just as happy. He's way happier and nicer guy than I ever thought by watching. Now, yeah. I mean, I met him a year ago. Maybe I met him at the very right time, right?
Yeah.
But actually met him in Nice where we met just a year prior. But so in triathletes or cyclists like that, what are you, like a Chelsea Sodaro or Sam Laidlow, when they're coming to a race specifically like the World Championships, whether that was in Nice or in Kona, what benefits are they seeing on race day or in the journey to race day because they have that neutral state of stress?
That's what the goal is, the neutral state of stress.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we look at Chelsea's Nice campaign, she couldn't run 4 weeks out. Not many people know that, but...
And that's probably part of it too, right?
Yeah.
That she didn't talk about.
Yeah, she didn't talk about it. And that was a really controlled response from the entire performance bubble about not saying that.
Yeah.
And there was stress there of what the marathon would actually do to her body.
Right.
And what we needed to do is get her to a point where it was the marathon was irrelevant. We could just, if we got through the marathon, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But we never thought we were going to in the first place.
Right. And that from the outside, that would seem like a very hard place to convince an athlete as driven and as successful at running like Chelsea to get to.
Yeah. So, and then from that, one, it's managing expectations.
Yeah.
So you don't look to exceed expectations, which is that reward pathway activation.
Yeah.
So if you think that you're where you should finish in Kona here is between 5th and 10th.
Yeah.
And you're running at the specific kilometre, the Queen K, in 5th, right?
Yeah.
Then that activation is heightened as well, and therefore you can extend and actually get more out of yourself as a result of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So.
But is there a point where, so if that athlete, is there a ceiling on it? Like if her goal was to be running 5th to 10th and she was running in 4th, are you like, is there a dysregulation?
But that also doesn't come as well. So if she's running 2nd and it's 5th to 10th, it's something that's a lot stronger than if she's actually 5th. Or there may be some negative feedback if she's 11th.
Right.
Yeah. So then how do you regulate your emotive state to be able to get yourself controlled enough to be able to move forward to whatever that and improve that performance as much as possible?
Totally. And that to me sparks a lot, because I think in coaching and in triathlon coaching and as an individual, a challenge for a lot of people, and we've talked about, belief is one thing and being aware of what you're actually capable of is a totally different thing. But want to try to give people viewing something that they can take away and how they can work on things. I think one we'll come back to is kind of that certainly not a dopamine like detox, because we know that's not a thing.
Yeah. But it actually is a thing, but it's the behavior that's a response that you're doing that. So you are actually reducing the amount of dopamine within the system.
But you're adjusting
adjusting the behavior, but that doesn't sell books and it doesn't do TikTok views.
It does not.
So
it does not. But so for me, and I wanted to come back to that, the goal setting and realistic expectations around what can happen in a race seems to be, from what you're saying, incredibly important. Because if you're someone whose heads are in the clouds, and I've known this in my career, but not from a neuroscience type of thing, but me knowing that, like, I tell athletes when I bring on a new professional athlete, I said my first year, I wrote down a list of goals, and actually written down in my list of goals was get your ass kicked. And guess what?
Awesome.
I got my ass kicked.
Yeah, nice.
So every race, instead of being like, win your first Ironman, it was get your ass kicked. And I went out with, and I had other goals, obviously, to keep me to a level, and had some successes. But in general, somebody always kicked my ass. And I feel like sometimes people will go in, especially new athletes or athletes that are maybe at a new race, like the VinFast Ironman World Championships, and be like, I want to win my age group. When in reality, if you looked, you're like, man, there's nothing you've done in your past that should allow you to think about that. That when that athlete then gets out on that race course and is not experiencing that, they're having a negative response.
Absolutely. Yeah. So self-awareness and self-regulation, really highly interlinked. Yeah. So self-awareness is your knowledge of what your behaviors and thoughts, behaviors, and actions project onto others, and how that projection makes them feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then how that internal dialogue also affects you at the same time.
Yep. Right. I've had some trouble with that in the past, but yeah.
That's the self-awareness.
Okay.
And how that goal setting, you also need to be incredibly self-aware.
Yeah.
To be able to be aware enough not to set those lofty goals.
Yeah.
Like shoot for the stars or whatever.
I call it like fairy dust.
Yeah,
right?
whatever. Yeah. But also ones that aren't hitting the ceiling. It's just like, I actually just want to finish Kona.
Right.
You know, when you can
Do more than that.
do far more than that. You
Yeah.
know, like have a performance goal that's almost not quite out of range.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
and then have fun with the journey of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the journey is what's going to elicit
Yeah.
the response
Yeah.
that is allowing you to
And
get
the self-regulation piece that we're saying before
Yeah.
is how you regulate your emotions
Yeah.
and how you regulate your internal dialogue and how you control your central nervous system to be able to be as calm as possible, or it's probably the easiest word for it, to be
Yeah.
as calm as possible, to be able to allow you the ability to fail. Yeah.
Right.
Be okay with that.
Where failure isn't going to be something that's catastrophic to you. Right.
No.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not about gaining anything. It's like if you're vulnerable enough to fail,
Yeah.
you actually get the most out of yourself.
And you're going to fail far less.
Yeah, because there is no failure.
Yeah.
If you give everything of what you do,
Yeah.
and you, like you were saying, in the like your Kona experiences, you always blew up. You never got the most out of yourself, or whatever. You know?
You never achieved the
Yeah,
like, the
you
goal,
never,
right?
yeah. But you should have got to the finish and just go, I actually gave everything of myself there.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's pictures that company way doesn't exist really anymore. Used for ads where I'm crossing the finish line and people are like, "Oh, did you win that race?"
Yeah.
Because me getting around this course was a dream, right?
Yeah.
And like that success.
Yeah, if you look at Chelsea
Yeah.
in Nice,
Yeah.
like she emptied herself. Like what she did was far beyond what any of her performance bubble
Thought she was gonna do.
knew that she could,
Yeah.
but she gave everything of herself to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And then one of the first things that was said to us was, I hope that was enough. All right?
Yeah. She didn't want to disappoint you guys.
No.
Yeah.
And that's
And
because
she could not walk.
because she has an emotional attachment to her performance bubble
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But she's more concerned about others than what she was for herself,
Right.
which is a whole different
It's another
piece
side.
to unpack.
Yeah.
But there is no way that she could have ran, or the overall time frame could have been any less than what she gave on that day.
Right.
So now, a month later, the reflection of that performance is far different
Sure. Of course.
than that. So, and I'm so incredibly proud of her, which I don't know whether that's the right wording or not, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm saying it anyway.
Yeah. Sure.
Of the performance that she put together, given the situation that presented herself and us with, given that, and that's all any athlete or performance staff should be asking.
Right, and I think, and to me, it's funny how how kind of perfect that whole story is because the fact that none of us knew that she was going through that is part of the reason she was able to overcome what none of us knew, right? Because she wasn't putting it out there. It wasn't this thing that she was like leaning on. It was like, okay, this is the thing. We're gonna do what we can.
Also, the person, Laura, who won that,
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
deserves
It's unreal.
so much it's not funny,
Right.
and no one's saying that. Like everyone had shit going on.
Yeah.
They had stuff going on in their preparation.
Yeah.
No one got it perfect.
Yeah.
So why bother with projecting whatever that is?
No one, including Laura.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And to me, that was unique about that race is that
Everyone's got stuff going on.
totally, and like talking to Kat and talking to Chelsea and other athletes, none of them for a second, when they said, oh, things could have been better, blah, 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 all of them were like, oh, Laura was it. None of what I'm saying actually matters on who won that race.
No, so why put it out there?
And totally, why not? And whether or not she's working with someone and spending a lot of time on neural pathways, Laura has so much fun.
Oh.
And like walking down every time I saw her, she'd like hang out of a car and wave at me, or like
Yeah.
she's, you know, showing me what treat she had that day. Like,
Awesome.
can I have a piece of your pizza? Like, she was having fun as soon as she landed in East. And there were times, I'm sure, where she wasn't. But those happiness watts were her setting herself up to have that performance.
Yeah, and those two women, like Laura and Kat, beat the living hell out of each other.
That was great.
In the first half of that marathon.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a triathlon person. Like, my work is far. I'm very new to this triathlon world.
Yeah.
Or newish anyway, a couple of years. And that's possibly the best race I think I've ever seen.
In all sports.
They were smashing each other.
It was crazy.
Was awesome.
And to me, what was rad about that, to speak to what we were talking about, the happiness watts, is that, I mean, they were both, again, fighting. Yeah. And Laura, when she had 200 meters, I rode up, you know, next to her and looked in her eyes, and she was hurting.
Yep.
And then 3 miles later, when she had a little bit more gap, she was hurting, but she did a little smile. Yeah. She knew. So like she went straight back to that positive side of things as quickly as she could.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I'm stoked that you were able to see that. And we love having you here in Kona. And I will say, so on parting note, if we had two things that we could share with athletes that are doing their first 70.3 or going to the Fast Ironman World Championships in preparation to or during the race, from a neuroscience point of view, what can they try to do to make themselves more on that steady, even side of things to then have that positive performance?
Have a metric or imperial shed load of fun, whichever one you do.
Yeah.
That's actually the most important thing. And secondly, don't put so much pressure on yourself for a performance metric as an outcome.
Process.
Yeah, make the performance metric actually doing the actual sport itself.
Yeah.
You know, so understand that it's a really privileged position to be in Kona, Hawaii.
Yeah.
At a world championship, and you've actually given yourself the opportunity to be able to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So that should be a reward portion in the first place.
Yeah.
And then from that, deliver a performance that you're proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And allow yourself to fail.
Yeah, that's a part of it that's interesting to me, because there is something freeing when allowing yourself to fail means you aren't going to judge yourself on that failure.
But that isn't a failure. That's a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The failure isn't part of the conversation.
Yeah, like be vulnerable enough to put it out there to allow yourself to fail.
Totally. And to me, what's funny, and we've talked a little bit about, not this specifically, but people watching. There will be people that watch or listen. I get like 7 or 8 listens. So
that's the self.
I know. I'm
in
sorry.
The past, he's
working on my self-deprecation. Yeah. But there's a percentage will still be like, oh, this is fluff, right? They'll be like, oh, this is that positive thinking, and it's like, no, this is
it's actually not about positive, because it can be a negative thought pattern that creates a performance.
Yeah,
it's fine.
So I'm not going to get into that because I can't understand that, but the fact that a world-renowned scientist that, again, works with the very best in every field that I'm familiar with in sport in general, says that being happy and enjoying the process and enjoying yourself is a key to actually achieving success is huge. And like again, there's people like me that were always positive thinking that I think fell into that. Like every race I ever did, when they marked my leg, I had to mark my leg with a number on one side, and the other side I made them put a smiley face.
Really?
Yeah. So every race I did, I looked down and I had a smiley face on my calf, and every person that I walked around had a smiley face go by them, or when I passed somebody on the bike, whatever, they saw a smiley face, and the person that got to put a smiley face on me.
That makes me so happy. Yeah.
But looking back at it, it's like, oh, that was actually me helping myself. And not knowing it at all.
Yeah. Yep. Because that made you laugh and gave you joy.
And I was chill.
Yeah.
And because I just assumed I was going to get my ass kicked anyways, it was fine. I love that. And before we part, I will have to call you out on one thing. And he put it in here himself. But David's new to triathlon and experiencing Kona for the first time, and we were hanging out last night, and he said, "Tell me what you learned about the Queen K yesterday."
So I didn't realise it was a road for a start. So I'm in the car with Rich Laidlow, and we're following Sam, and he's sort of doing an effort. And I looked up and saw this sign that said the Queen, I actually don't know.
Kahumanu.
Yeah, highway.
Yeah.
And I looked across at Rich and said, "It's actually a road." And he goes, "Pardon?" I said, "I thought it was like the premier kilometre."
The best kilometer.
The best kilometre within, like, at Kona.
That's
like
where it all goes down.
Yeah, it's like this revered 0.6 of a freedom mile. I had no idea.
And I mean, when I take a step back, it makes sense, but it's also hilarious.
Yeah, but the Energy Lab's the same thing. I did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, he thought it was, and a lot of people think the Energy Lab is where you get energy or you give energy away.
Yeah, but it's the science
No,
energy
it's actually
thing.
a science thing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
It did make me laugh as well because I'm going
to mark out a kilometer for you out on the Queen Kahumanu Highway.
Oh, we have already.
We'll make it. Have
so
you?
we now have a 0.6 of a freedom mile that we classify as a slight uphill as well.
That's amazing.
So,
how excited are you to be out here and watch Sam do his thing on Saturday?
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're in a state where we need to be able to control ourselves. He's ready to produce a performance.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like on the day.
Yeah.
Remains to be seen. I'm very confident that he'll put together something that he'll be proud of, wherever that lands him. He's going to leave whatever it is out there.
No doubt about that.
And like, as much as I'm not a triathlon person, I've known of this place. I'm 50 this year, maybe 40 years, or however, and so it's actually quite a special place.
You can feel why it's special?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd kind of like to come here when it's not race week as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. But yeah, I get it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love being able to be around. I remember my first time watching this race, so I'm always excited to see people experience it for the first time and seeing the joy you had being around the Nice course. I'm certainly excited for you to be there, and we'll see you out on the Queen K.
Yeah, we just got to figure out which one of it is.
Out where it is. Awesome, dude. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for watching or listening to the Ironman Insider podcast presented by Maurten. Again, that was Dr. David Spindler. You should Google his name. And I know it's challenging. It certainly is challenging to get everything that he has learned about what he does and what he's put upon athletes in this short little podcast, especially with me here trying to understand everything he's saying. You can tell I got a little bit hazy a few times, but and get on the internet and do some looking on the nervous system and neural responses and what you can do, because I promise you, you'll perform better and be happier. Which one of those comes first, you'll have to decide. But again, thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Matt Lieto for the Ironman Insider podcast presented by Maurten.